What is up, guys? This is Pete Carruthers Clark, and welcome back to the Carrot Poker Podcast. This is episode number 74, and today this is going to be a mental game episode, and I'm going to be talking to you guys all about the alien world problem, which is something that features quite heavily in my new book that I'm currently working on that I expect to be ready in hopefully 2 to 3 months' time from now. I was going to say 4 to 5 months, but I've just hit one of those energy surges where you just decide, that's it, I'm going to get this done. I'm now too deep into this book for it to be one of the many, many projects that I start and then abandon because I didn't get into it enough. So now that I've invested enough time, I think there's a formula here somewhere where if enough time has gone into something, you kind of just have to follow through with it until the end, even if you don't want to. But the thing is, for once, I'm actually really enjoying writing this book, and it is going to be called Poker Therapy. And the premise of Poker Therapy is basically that everybody needs it. So, I mean, there's a school of thought that would say the same thing about real life, right? That everybody could benefit from some kind of therapy there. But the idea with poker therapy is that, I've coached hundreds and hundreds of students. I teach anywhere between 2 and 8 or 9 students every single day, apart from weekends, of course, which I spend not playing poker or doing poker stuff, but I digress. And when I teach these students, over the years, I've kind of realized that one of the biggest correlations, the most prominent correlations in poker coaching is that work that is done on both mental and technical game really pays dividends. So if we did a kind of experiment here, we did a case study and we got 50 students, all with the same, well, let's say 100 students of the same ability, and with 50 of them, we taught them just technical game, and with the other 50, we taught them a mix of technical game and mental game, and really tailored the mental game coaching for where their biggest weaknesses were. I really think that you would see not just a small trend towards the ones that were taught both doing better, but you would see an overwhelmingly massive trend towards that. Now, I don't have empirical data to back this up yet, at least, but I have observed it just gradually and kind of implicitly just over the course of my coaching career, which is now about 9 years long. So yeah, I've kind of taught enough people to see that this is what works, this is what gets results. So what I wanted was to put out a book that just focused on the mental game, but I didn't want it to be like every other mental game book or a lot of mental game books that are all about practical habits and meditation and sleeping well and eating well. It's nothing like that. Actually, what we're going to do in this book is actually I use my experience as a poker coach and professional poker player and author and all of that, and my familiarity with the game, and my sort of high level ability to understand technical concepts and mental concepts. So I'm trying to take that and teach mental game and actually treat mental game ailments that are very common and most students suffer from to some extent. Basically all of the what we call misfires, which are your brain trying to perform a thought process that is going to help you or protect you in some way. And usually that thought process is quite a good thing in real life, but in poker it's disastrous. We're going to take those misfires and rewire them into healthy poker thought processes, but we're going to use actual poker situations, actual hands I talk about with students, real people, real coaching stories, as testament to that, to exemplify just how much progress can be made on the mental game if you actually do it in the poker context. So this is I'm trying to hit a niche in the market here by bringing out a book that is actually going to help poker players with their mental game, but do it in a way that is completely also related to the technical elements of the game, using real hand history examples, sometimes real thought processes from real students, that kind of thing. But we're also therapy part comes in because I have been researching just cognitive behavioral therapy. I've been researching just a lot of psychology and things like that, and just getting a much better understanding of how the subconscious works. And as I've been doing that, I've had many, many aha moments and epiphanies where I've said, okay, I now know how to better understand and explain my theory about why students have X mental game leak or Y mental game leak. So hopefully that makes sense. So stay tuned for the book Poker Therapy. It will be out in a few months' time, and I will obviously update all of you guys on the podcast. You can stay tuned on carrotcorner.com and see when that book is coming out. I really do think it's going to be a breakthrough for a lot of you guys, just because the same mental game work that I've been doing in private sessions has been a breakthrough for so many of my students, and they have reported almost invariably that some of the best lessons that they had with me, some of the most useful lessons, have been ones where we just focused on a few of their mental game leaks that were really holding them back It might not be news to you guys, but there are many, many poker players out there who have absolutely no chance of success no matter how much technical work they do on their game because of their mental game issues going neglected. And if that's been you for a while and you've recently discovered that working on the mental game is very important, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And if that's sounds like that's still you, where mental game issues are just holding you back, I really hope that this book is going to be the answer that you're looking for, and also just that you will start taking the mental game a bit more seriously, having listened to this podcast. So I'm going to go over now what I call the alien world problem, which is the basic premise of the book. It's basically, I think that any good book presents a problem and explains why all of the mental game issues in poker, well, not all of them, but why most of them actually exist in the first place, and then seeks to use that explanation as the basis for a treatment plan and for better understanding the leaks and getting rid of them, diagnosing and then treatment. So the alien world problem is basically my idea that represents the source of the issue for most people in the mental game of poker. Poker's mental game is the kind of thing where most of the things that you do wrong, for example, getting very angry at aggressive regulars and trying to overcompensate and take spewy lines against them, or whether it may be fearing certain lines too much and folding because you're terrified of downswings and losing a big pot, or whatever the mental game ailment may be, a lot of these are actually grounded in the alien world problem, which is that poker is an alien world. It is not the same world that all of these processes that have served you well all through your life, and furthermore, served your ancestors well all throughout evolutionary history. It's not even just that you as a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old were growing up to look at the results of your actions and then form reliable rules about what actions cause what results on a regular basis based on one or two occurrences. It's also that your ancestors did that for many, many years also. So when you were a child and you realized that pressing the button and waiting before you crossed the road got mummy's approval, and then that became a good thing to do, was to look before you cross the road. Obviously, the real reason for that is so you don't get obliterated by a car, but maybe originally you do it because your parents tell you to, and that feels good. You get praised for it, and walking through that labyrinth of praise and scorn that your parents throw at you is one of the ways that we learn to cope with the world. But it's not just that we walked through that labyrinth as kids and learned how to get praise and how to get scorn, and therefore what was good and what was bad to do, and therefore how to prosper. We also learned these things throughout evolutionary history. Our ancestors who did not prioritize, for example, survival and constantly put themselves in precarious situations, obviously reproduced at a less effective rate, and their offspring were less likely to survive, and therefore natural selection, in the wonderful way that it tends to do, was able to weed out all of those genes and give us pretty much a situation where we could say with certainty that if you don't have a strong survival instinct, that there's something wrong inside your genetic makeup, or maybe just inside your brain cognitively, I don't know. But that's the idea, is that the real world, so planet Earth, and evolving and growing up on planet Earth, has, in those two different ways, taught us a bunch of very reliable, very useful mental processes, programs. You can call them firings of just different programs out there to help you, serve you, and protect you. So when these programs fire in normal life, they fire very well. For example, I will look before I cross the road. I will, if something bad happens because of just after something that I have done and it seems to be related, I will usually make some kind of causal attribution of that being my fault. I said something, I upset my girlfriend, she cried, that was probably what I said. Let me examine that and see what the problem was there and what mistake I might have made. Whereas in poker is an alien world, right? So all the laws of nature, all the rules are different. All of the programs that we have evolved and learned in childhood to use for our own benefit do not work. A lot of them are actually really, really inappropriate. So when I talk about misfires, which is the term in this book, Poker Therapy, that I'm actually going to use to describe all forms of mental game problems, tilt, anything, I'm going to call it, well, usually I'm going to call it a misfire. I'll get to the other type of tilt later that I don't really cover in the book, but most forms of tilt are going to be just simply misfirings of normal, healthy programs that serve us well in life. It's just that it just so happens in poker that they don't work. Let me illustrate. For example, in poker, you could have a situation where you decide to call a river bet from some kind of unknown villain. And calling that river bet, you run into the nuts. And it feels bad, and you feel silly, and you feel like you should have folded your top pair, and you form all of these kind of causal links between your call and losing that hand. One preceded the other, so we have a case of correlation and temporal correlation. One happens immediately after the other. So the brain therefore runs a program that basically goes y immediately after x, therefore if x then y. So basically what we're saying there is that if y follows x immediately and seems to be related to it, then y probably caused x. And that is very good in life. And the example I use in poker therapy when I'm talking about this causal feedback idea is the time that I grabbed my dad's razor that he left by the bath, that he was obviously shaving in the bath as a fairly relaxing thing to do. I mean, back in the day when I didn't grow a beard and actually shaved with the razor, I used to shave in the bath as well, so fair enough. I don't know why I'm defending my dad's choice to shave in the bath as if there's like something wrong with it and he should be mocked for it. I don't know. But anyway, one time he'd obviously gone out of the room while I was like 3 or 4 years old or something, and I was in the bath or whatnot, and he'd gone out of the room, and the razor had been left by the side of the bath. And I remember being a little infant and looking at this razor and being like, oh my God, like that's that forbidden thing that I'm normally not allowed to touch. I must see what it does. I must have it. And I grabbed at it, and lo and behold, it sliced open my thumb, and I screamed and bawled the house down. My dad came running back into the room. Pete, you don't play with razors. Razors are bad. Look what you've done. Hopefully you'll learn a lesson from this. Me sobbing, yes, Dad, I've definitely learned a lesson. Razor is awful. It hurts me. It causes blood and pain. So that was a very, very good program that I ran there. You could see that like I'm running that program as a little kid because my ancestors also ran that program and it helped them to survive. So they handed down the certain genes that run that make sense of the world through causal feedback sort of program. They all ran that. So now that I use that process, I actually prospered in life, right? Because I was a bit scared of razors actually for like another 10 years after that. I was dreading, coming of age and having to shave myself one day until I actually did it and realized that they don't cut you every single time you use them. You have to kind of just not like run your hand along the blade like an idiot, or like a 4-year-old. I guess 4-year-olds are kind of idiots, right, in that sense. Anyway, so the idea there was that I learned this program and it became really, really ingrained. Like I'm just going to use that process in life. Like if I do something and it causes something and the consequences are notably good or bad of that thing, I will examine my actions. And if they were good consequences, I'll repeat those actions as much as possible. And if they were bad, then I will try to refrain from doing that thing again as far as I have control over. The problem is that in poker, when I make the river call and happen to lose, my brain does the same thing. It goes calling river in this sort of spot equals bad. Now, it might well be that my river call was actually good. What factors would make a river call good? Well, that's right. It would be technical stuff, right? It would be things like villain's likely range, his line, the population's tendency with said line, my pot odds, my blockers, all these kind of sort of technical things. But because of causal feedback, my emotional brain, my reptilian brain or whatever, just likes to go, okay, X, then Y, therefore X caused Y, and then the next time on the river, I might not want to make that call. Now, I say me here figuratively because actually I myself don't do that anymore because I've been around the block too many times in poker to ever want to give in to causal feedback anymore. And I'm so aware of it and I've been working on it for years and years and years that it doesn't creep into my game in that many spots anymore. But do you know what? It's so intrinsically human that it does in some spots. But when I say me, I'm just kind of like meaning the average student, the average aspiring player, because my students who are not necessarily very successful yet at poker, but aspire to be, are going to have huge problems with things like causal feedback. So causal feedback, the idea that you attribute X to Y because Y came after X, is very much a symptom of this alien world problem. The fact that your processes and your firings were learned in life on Earth, like with the normal environment of trees and horses and people and roads and cars and razors and things like that, where generally the laws of physics govern that realm, right? And when one thing happens, there's not that much variance in it, and it will tend to produce the same results every time it happens. I fill the kettle up with water, lo and behold, the kettle gets full, and then I can make tea. So it's pretty normal in life for that to be the case, but in poker it's not. So the fact that it's not is something that the fact that variance plays such a huge, huge role in actually dampening our ability to form accurate rules in the short term, that is something that we understand consciously. Like we know on the river there consciously that we can't just judge the merit of that call based on whether we won this one time or not. We know that, yet we still do it emotionally, we still do it subconsciously. How many times have you found yourself in a spot like that, beating yourself up, analyzing the hand, trying to figure out a reason why the call was wrong, just so you can have some control over the action, just so you can attribute some kind of cause to that action that actually your subconscious doesn't want to admit is just the result of variance. So if this is resonating with you and you're kind of understanding where I'm going here, then you will probably like Poker Therapy, my new book, a lot. And you'll get a good idea of what other problems arise from the alien world problem, from poker being this different realm from where we've learned all of our survival mechanisms. And there's many, many other ones, and I break down different types of tilt that ensue and just different types of mindset problems that ensue from that, and that can be on the table or off the table. And give you guys another couple of examples of ways in which the alien world problem wreaks havoc on our mental game before I wrap up for today's podcast, right? So I've already gone over causal feedback. So I'm going to go earlier back into the book now, into Poker Therapy, as it is currently in end of May 2019. So it's about a third of the way complete at this point. And we're going to talk about the fairness test. So let's talk about that. This is a kind of interesting concept that I'd never really put into words before, but I'd always kind of known about. So when I was writing Poker Therapy, what I did was I've put a lot of the concepts that I've always kind of known about into words for the first time and made figures about them and little graphs and flow charts with thought processes. So this book is going to be packed full of figures and things like that. Anyway, I'm going to quote from the book here. So I've written here, the fairness test. In the 1950s, a white male was many times more likely to get a job than a black female of equal employability. When a non-prejudiced, morally educated human appraises the situation, he reacts with disapproval. It's unfair. If you come home to find your house has been burgled and the perpetrator is found but never convicted due to insufficient evidence, that's unfair. Hardworking Jim applies for promotion, but lazy John gets it because his uncle is the manager. Again, unfair. So those are three cases from real life, right? I'm no longer quoting now, I'm back to ranting again. So these three cases from real life are generally going to enter our consciousness when we read them or hear about them or see them unfold. And then our mind is going to run a sort of test to see like whether that is a fair situation or not. It's going to do this like very much in the background and we're not aware of it. And things that fail that fairness test under this analogy are going to be deemed unfair, and usually we're going to react to that if it happens to us or a family or a loved ones, probably with a lot of anger and resentment and perhaps anxiety and just an urge, stress, an urge to sort of change it and fight for what's right. And if that happens to someone we don't know or care about intimately, we might just end up going, oh, that's a shame, that's not very fair. We might react with pity or just a little bit of disapproval. But either way, we deem those situations unfair. The thing is that when we play poker, because again, we've not grown up playing poker, your dad or your mum didn't show you how to play poker when you were an infant, probably. I mean, my dad showed me chess, but that was a bit different. So because of that, you have not actually grown up to learn how to adapt the fairness test or any other mechanism that's normally there to help you out in life for poker. And because of that, it will return inaccurate results. So here's an example. So running bad, I quote, for the third day in a row is actually perfectly fair. Every poker player experiences such bouts of variance at various points during his career. Poker is not so much a matter of who runs good or bad per se, but of who is currently running good or bad. In the end, we all have roughly the same amount of luck. So the thing is that you accept that consciously, right? But subconsciously, your brain still runs the same fairness test that you ran in the case of that 1950s recruitment example, the house being burgled, or the guy that gets a job because his uncle's a manager. You kind of applied your fairness test in 3 days of running bad, and emotionally speaking and subconsciously speaking, and in terms of your reaction to that running bad for 3 days, you definitely did not think that was fair. Like, you might accept consciously that it's fair, but you will behave and feel as though that is unfair, that you ran bad for 3 days, and that will cause problems in your game. It will make you not want to play. It'll make you want to play more, depending on your personality type. It'll make you chase losses, quit poker. It'll make you play badly, tilt, try to get your stack in, refrain from getting your stack in even when you should. depending on whether you choose a fight or flight response to that emotional stimulus, it will affect you in some way. And because of that, it basically means that your brain thinks it's unfair. Because what does unfair mean when it happens to us or someone we care about? It means that we have to rectify it, right? It generally causes anger, which is the active form of malcontent, basically. We are not happy with this situation and we are actively unhappy with it. Therefore, we are angered. People who are activists or protesters or whatever, campaigners for some kind of important cause that's important to them, are generally angry a lot of the time, but they channel that anger in a positive way. So you will become angry in poker whenever you perceive a situation to be unfair subconsciously, and that will be whenever somebody gets something that they shouldn't normally get or don't deserve, and it's at your expense. And that's going to be like really, really often. And that fairness test, part of the alien world problem, actually explains why you react in the way that you do to losing pots because of suckouts or whatever. I'm not assuming that you personally, that every player always tilts whenever they get sucked out on, but there will be a tolerance gauge that when it has overflown, you will overflown. I don't know. My English has gone to hell today. I've been writing for too long. But the point is that when that gauge overflows, you will no longer be able to contain the subconscious ideas that things are unfair, and those appraisals of things being unfair will then trigger an active form of rectification. That's going to be anger, it's going to be bad play, or it's going to be something undesired, unwarranted, basically, from a logical standpoint. So there's lots of other ways that poker is an alien world, and basically what I'm going to do now is finish up by just talking about the two types of mental game problems that actually exist in the world for poker players. The first one is all of those misfires. So basically a human being who's normally like quite healthy and successful, just trying to use, because they know no better subconsciously, their learned behaviors that were learned from the real world in a poker setting, and then those ideas kind of bouncing back off the poker world and not working, but then the subconscious being kind of rigid and stuck and not being able to readjust. That is what I call a misfire, because it is actually an appropriate response in some world, but the sense in which that process is misfiring is that in poker things are different. So that is a misfire, and that is probably what 90 to 95% of our tilts or mental game issues actually are. Another type of poker leak is something I'd call a true fire, which is where we actually have a faulty process in life. We have a process in life that is like some kind of maybe a mental illness or character disorder, or just some kind of thing that really hurts us that shouldn't be there in life. And obviously that tends to hurt us in poker as well. Unfortunately, the inverse to the alien world problem is not true. That, just because things that are good in life are bad in poker, that does not entail that things that are actually bad in life end up working well in poker. For example, if you're a violent, angry alcoholic or something like that, and you end up playing poker, that will not somehow end up being a good thing for you in poker. It'll make it a lot worse, right? So kind of extreme example, but yeah. The other type of mental game ailment you can have then is that you have a problem outside of poker that manifests also in poker, and to deal with that, I don't think you can just treat a misfire based on the alien world problem, that poker's a different land and requires different rules. I think you actually have to rewire yourself on Earth first, and then see how that healthy process misfires in poker, and then fix it again in that realm. So just to clarify, I am not, clinically trained as a psychiatrist or anything like that, and I will not be talking about like mental health problems outside of poker. I'll just be talking about how normal, healthy humans, who are the majority of the people that I teach, actually don't function well mentally in poker because of the nature of poker, which I am a specialist in. So hopefully that explains why somebody without a lot of clinical training can give therapy in a topic. It's because they know how a normal person, of which I hope I am close to being one, and all my students are pretty close to being normal people. I guess no one's totally normal. How they react to the foreign alien world of poker, and that is something that I am very experienced with. So stay tuned for the book. I'll keep you guys updated, and stay tuned for the podcast making a return. If there's something to promote, the chances are that I will actually get into a good habit of making more podcasts again. If you have any questions or comments about the book, feel free to leave them on YouTube if you're watching the podcast there in the thread. Also, feel free to email me, admin@carrotcorner.com, and do check out my website, In the meantime, before this book comes out, if you've not read my books, The Grounder's Manual and 100 Hands, I'd highly recommend that for getting a good foundation. Technical game, Tile versus Population is out as well. It's a magazine for e-magazine for people who are a little bit more curious about the solver element of the game and how game theory can be used to actually crush regulars who don't abide by it. And yeah, we'll be back with more podcasts and guests and students very soon. So yeah, keep in touch, guys. Let me know how you're doing. admin@carrotcorner.com if you need to email me about coaching or products or questions or anything else. All right, guys, I'll see you on the next podcast then. Bye bye for now.